Hi everyone, this is Lauren coming at you from the break zone with another Opus 6 reveal as everybody's getting ready for the pre-release. So we're going to start off with some of the cards. So as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't caught it, in the fire I guess you could say review, pre-release review and reveal for Opus 6, I'll be going over the cards and I will be kind of going over my first impressions in terms of how effective these cards will be in constructed as well as in in sealed, because sealed will be a relevant format as it you can qualify for the North America Championship by playing sealed at Gen Con. So first card up we've got is Isel. So this card's pretty cool. We're talking about like a backup that can search. It's a category 14. Cool job title, Lady Iceheart. I bet a lot of people really like this card. It's pretty awesome, and anybody that's played Final Fantasy 14 actually probably really likes this character. And being able to search out any forward, any ice forward, and put it into your hand can be quite relevant. We're talking about like sometimes you want to go for that Genesis in the mid game when you're playing mono ice. It's still going to help you out. Also in the early turns, if you might want to set up backups, for example, if you play if you depend heavily on ice or specific ice forwards, Isel can be pretty good. So in constructed, I think she's good, and sealed, I think she's great as well because in sealed, being able to search out a specific forward of the element that you're playing can be backbreaking and game winning. So definitely a a strong card to use in sealed and constructed. I'm sure people will find ways to use it. Okay. Next up, we've got Emina. So Emina, pretty cool card. We're talking about Type 0 cards. It's a backup 2 drop, so that's always relevant. The fact that you can freeze a forward that your opponent controls is kind of like a mini Jill. You can think about it that way, right? Just one of them. No EX though, but the fact that you could actually break her if you want to. So it's useful at kind of holding off aggression if you want to either race your opponent or if your opponent's being very aggressive against you, being able to freeze them one turn. And if you really want to, if that forward is very relevant and very problematic for you, then go ahead and break it to break a dull forward. So keep in mind that that ability is quite pricey, whether you want to use it by itself to duel and discard 2 cards to be able to use it, or if you have it as your 5th backup or your 3rd backup. Either or, whenever you have enough to actually pay an even cost and discard cards on top of it to be able to use its effect, it can be good, but it's going to be interesting to see if people want to use it in constructed. But when we're talking about sealed, this card is amazing. I mean, we're talking about taking care of your opponent's biggest forward or most problematic forward that they have against you. As long as you don't have Brave, it's going to be able to be very useful to you. Not too many Brave cards in this set, so Emina is going to be a very good card in my opinion. Okay. Next up, we've got Scholar. Scholar is a great card. Let's see, 2-drop backup. Choose 1 forward. Cost 2 or less your opponent controls. Dull and freeze it. You know what? I take that back. But the fact that it's a 2 cost is good. 2 cost backup. Constructed, I don't think she'll see that much play. The uses for it are for the Scholar are a little bit too narrow. I do love the art though, but I don't know. Even in sealed, it might be just a little bit too niche to use. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like to be proven wrong, but it's gonna be tough. All right. Next up, we got a different version of Kazusa and a backup at that. 5 cost is darn expensive. But being able to choose 1 till 4, deal it 10,000 damage there's a high chance that you'll be able to take out a forward that your opponent has that's not Brave, that doesn't have Brave, and being able to break it to kind of go for the win. So this card can definitely be back-breaking in terms of being a 2-use summon. One of them to to break a dull forward, and on a later turn being able to use it as somewhat of an Opus 3 Shiva to be able to dull 2 forwards can be very useful. The cost isn't too hefty in terms of being able to break it, but the cost to use it is can be quite heavy. But if you add them up together, it's hard for ice to break forwards normally, especially since Mateus, for example, is good at when you're on the offensive, but not so much on defensive, right? So if your opponent kind of has control of the field, then you're gonna have a hard time. But if they're attacking into you, then Kasuza becomes more relevant than Mateus at that point if they're being very aggressive, and it can cost them. It can just swing the game around, and getting some more value out of it afterwards to be able to break it to get a Shiva effect is it gets you a lot of value back, but you've got to be able to use it at the right time. So I wouldn't use too many copies of it, but if you do get it at the right time, it can definitely win you the game. Okay. Next up, we've got Bard. So let's see, Bard. I don't know. It's like the previous Kasuza, not this one, not the one from this set, but from a previous set. It's pretty cool. Being a multi-card, being a standard unit, 2-drop backup. Sometimes it can help you, especially set up a Sid Alstein play in constructed. In sealed, it can also help you as sometimes opponents are having a hard time putting things together, but you might not be able to focus so much on the discard theme of ice, and if you're playing in sealed. So I mean, I'd like to be proven wrong like many other cards, but right now I'm not seeing that many uses for it. Besides being a 2-cost backup, though. All right. Afterwards, oh, you know what? Upside down card. Why? Because I don't have that card on hand, so I won't be able to show it to you right now. But let's see. Let's talk about. I believe it is the following card would be Kuja, which is a 5-drop forward EX, 9,000 power. The forward type is Genome, and the titles for the category is Dissidia Final Fantasy 9. And for the X Burst, when Kuja enters the field, choose one forward or monster opponent controls, duel and freeze it. So it's forward or monster, which can be very helpful. And to duel and freeze, then I guess you get the full effect of a Laguna Squall combo when Laguna gets in from the EX. Or if you want to think about it that way, also when you like a Genesis effect, which is really cool. And the fact that you can get it, there's a second ability on this card, which lets you put 2 ice backups into the break zone. Return Kuja to your hand. You can only use this ability during your main phase. And if Kuja is in the break zone, you can return to your hand. So that's pretty cool in terms of if your opponent was able to deal with Kuja to begin with, or if you were to use Kuja to kind of block a difficult forward and it goes to the break zone, then you'll be able to play it out again. So it can slow down your opponent. I think this card's pretty cool. There's definitely some things you can do in constructed, and in sealed is going to be amazing. I mean, we're talking about a 9,000 power body. That's pretty relevant. And being able to dual freeze might win you the game as well. This card's going to be huge in sealed and could definitely be very useful in constructed. All right. Next up, we've got Kurasame. So I think Kurasame, 5-drop 7K, that's definitely under the curve. But being able to search out a card, Emina or Kazusa, can be kind of useful. But for the most part, I don't know if I want to use them that often. And also, it doesn't come in that big. But the second ability to give all ass forwards other than Kurasame, you control plus 1,000 power, can be pretty good, especially when you're trying to be, you could say, somewhat mid-range, mid to late game aggressive. Maybe not super late game, but maybe mid-range mostly. Being able to give plus 1,000 power and being able to search out, let's say, Kasuza to swing the tide, as we mentioned earlier. Hold on, let me pull up that card again. In case you guys kind of forgot already, we've got Emina and Kasuza in this set. So for sealed, it could definitely help you. I mean, there's a high chance that you're going to be able to get some of these cards. I mean, they come in as rare, so it's not the biggest chance, but being able to, if you get Kurasame, being able to get it as a 3-drop 7K that gets you a card that kind of these two cards really help you like kind of seal the game like mid-late game. So it's something to consider. I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's great in constructed. It has some really cool synergies there, but I don't know how much I want to rely on it because 5 cost is pretty heavy. The fact that it's the EX is going to be able to get you some card advantage, so it's up to you. I definitely think there's going to be some uses for certain decks to be able to use Kurosame to a fairly good effect, but it's how great it is if it's like a super chase rare. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's pretty good. Okay. Next up, we have the real Doom Train. All right. So with this Doom Train, you're able to get its cost reduced by 2 if your opponent has almost no cards in hand. So if you go for the, let's say, turbo discard route that was pretty popular in Opus 5, this card can come in really cheap. And to be able to choose one duel 4 dealing 9,000 damage if you're in a race, that's huge. And if you're able to, let's say, for example, use Snow or any kind of dull freeze effect such as Genesis or Opus 3 Kuja, you could definitely get some forwards to dull and be able to break them to deal up to 9,000 damage is going to break a lot of forwards actually, so that can be quite relevant. So this card might have its uses, and when we're talking about sealed, removal is pretty good. I mean, I would say removal is king, you know, in terms of surprising your opponent, especially when you're going to attack. So if your opponent does the forward your opponent is using to attack doesn't have Brave, it will dull itself. And when it's dull, you'll be able to use Doom Train, and if they'll probably have more than one card in hand because most players won't be playing many cards after they draw them at the beginning of their turn during their draw phase. So you might not be able to get Doom Train at a reduced cost in sealed, but you'll most likely be able to take out a forward when they attack. So this card is going to be pretty big in sealed, and in constructed, there's definitely some uses that could make it come into play, but it's a little bit harder to set up than some other removal or dull freeze effects that you might see. Okay. Next up, we've got, this one's hard to say, Militesi Quirrell. So it's a monster, and some of the theme of this set is that at 0 cost activation, monsters that turn into 4s are pretty cool. So this one is kind of like a Snow from Opus 1, the 1 cost 3k. Or I forgot what it was called. There was definitely another one that came in Opus 3 that was able to kind of come in, and whenever you attacked, it was able to dull a forward. So this one will be able to use it as well. If you use this in combination with other cards such as, you know, the previously shown Doom Train, Doom Train, you'll be able to dull the forward and deal in 9,000 damage with the Doom Train. That's pretty cool. I think it's a okay card, but I mean, at the 3 cost 5k, it's definitely a little bit on the curve. Its ability is amazing. So in Seal is going to be good. In Constructed, I'll wait to see if anybody breaks it. Okay. Next up, we've got Summoner. I think this card's amazing in Constructed. Being able to return 2 ice summons from your break zone to your hand. This card pretty much replaces itself. I mean, we're talking about 4 cost. I mean, 3 to play it, 1 more and dull it. So maybe about 5 to be able to get 2 key ice summons. Could be even the same ice summons back to your hand. So let's say 2 Mateuses or Zalera or anything like that. So being able to get cards back from your break zone is so big because in the early turns, most decks that go mid to late game want to set up backups, and normally you pitch cards that are not backups early on, and you might want them back, so you got to be very careful, especially if you play a lot of 1-ofs. Now if you play this Summoner, you won't be as scared to discard your other maybe one copy of in your deck summons early on to play out your cards, such as your backups, because you'll be able to get them back later. And other cards that you might want to think about is like Zalera, for example. If you only run like 1 or 2 or maybe just 1 copy, being able to get it back with Summoner, or get a Mateus or Shiva or a Glacia Lambolas, which is so huge in ice decks, I think is going to be very good. Okay. Next up, we've got Ice Summoner. So Not seeing much use. There's already a copy of it in Opus 1. It's a reprint, so not much use in constructed. So I'm going to skip straight to sealed. In sealed, it counts as a 2 cost or odd cost backup, so it's going to help you out to build up backups, to set up efficiency to go to your mid late game. I think it's a very good card in sealed. So if you're playing a lot of ice, this is definitely a card to consider. Okay. Next up, we've got a mono art, Squall. Squall's pretty cool if you're going like the heavy discard. The fact that it's a 2 cost is even better because normally if you want to go very aggressive and 2 cost versus 3 cost is huge because you might not want to play your backups too much early on, and being able to just pitch 1 card to be able to play Squall might be the way that you use it. If you go, for example, the turbo discard, this card can definitely come in at let's say 2 cost AK haste first strike, which is big. So it will work well with Flauns and Buckaboos, Thaumaturge, Argath, Lock, Genesis, all those cards that force your opponent to discard, Glacial Bolas, all that stuff. You'll be able to usually get the first effect off, and if you're able to set up the other effect, that's pretty good. I would still consider Sid Alstein most of the time over this card because Sid Alstein would be straight removal instead of damage. But this card might be able to find a home in the turbo discard decks. Okay. Next up, we've got Snow. All right, so Snow, pretty cool. He's on curve at 3 cost 7k. But if you have, for example, a Sarah forward, because Sarah is both category 13 and named Sarah, you'll be able to get a 3 cost 9k. So that's pretty cool. But keep in mind that in terms of combat tricks, if you attack with your Snow thinking, haha, it's a 9k, and they are able to remove your Sarah from the field, it will revert back to a 7k and might run into a blocker that will take it out. So this card in constructed might be pretty cool. In sealed, there's definitely some there should be some category 13 forwards in this set, but I don't think there's a Sarah in this set, so you will not be able to get that other effect off. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty good as being on curve at 3 cost 7k, but might not be that effective in constructed otherwise, in sealed otherwise. Okay. Next up, we've got Snow Giant. So Snow Giant is going to be able to dull and freeze an opposing forward. So that's really cool. It's going to cost you 2, which is pretty interesting. So if you curve out and actually get backup, Snow Giant becomes more relevant. In terms of whether or not there's room in current ice decks to be able to use it effectively, I'm not quite sure. But in sealed, I think this card is very good. Being able to dull and freeze a forward of, let's say, any cost or any power can swing you the game. So in sealed, I would definitely heavily consider using this card. But in constructed, it's left to be seen. All right, next up, we've got Salas. Yay, a new version of Salas. Unfortunately for Salas, this card is named Salas. 2 cost 5k for 2 ICP. Salas gains 3,000 power until end of turn. You can only use this ability once per turn. So she can turn herself into AK. That's pretty cool. So in Turbo Discard, this might be okay, but there's not much room in Turbo Discard, and I don't know if this card would be... I don't think this card would be relevant enough to do that. In terms of Sealed, this card is pretty cool in terms of the fact that it can turn into an AK, which can be relevant. And sometimes you might be able to bluff out that you have another ice card in your hand to be able to use that ability. And that could be kind of cool, but that's something that you kind of leave as a filler to your sealed deck if you need it. I would definitely not base my whole deck around this card. Keep in mind that since it's a 2 cost, there's going to be in constructed some other shenanigans you could pull off, such as using the Fire Godot that's 4 CP to be able to give her plus 2,000 power boost and 2 drop 7k. So I'm definitely starting to brew up ideas about Godot, which I think is a pretty fun card to use, but we'll see if that works. Next up, we've got Shock Trooper. So 4-drop AK, very relevant and sealed. Standard unit, that's pretty cool too. Type 0. When Shock Trooper attacks, choose one forward, put in controls, break it, and break Shock Trooper. Uh, so 4-drop AK, that's good as a blocker, but when it attacks, it's so. I mean, it's definitely some kind of semi-form of removal, if you want to count it as if you're playing the mid to late game ice, then it's pretty cool in terms of being a good blocker early on, and then when you need to go to on the attack, you'll be able to break a forward by attacking with Shock Trooper. I think that's very interesting. I think it could see play. I'm not sure about Constructed. In Sealed, I think this card is amazing. In Constructed, maybe not quite as much. Next up, we have Hades. That's the card that the Break Zones has spoiled for E3, if you were able to kind of check out those videos. Hades is very interesting. If you're able to play the mid game, I think this card is amazing in terms of Constructed or Sealed. I mean, it's removal and sealed, so that's just amazing. And in Constructed, there's definitely times when, you know, for example, the 5-cost Mateus being able to remove an attacking forward from the game. Hades is going to be able to get you a lot of value. Where as soon as they attack, if they don't have Brave, they'll be dull, and you'll be able to choose it and break it. On top of being able to force a discard out of your opponent's hand, that this card technically costs, well, if you could pay for it, like it'll technically cost 3 in terms of the amount of value you get out of it. Being able to get your opponent to discard a card if they have a card in hand, which most of the time an opponent is going to attack and going to have 2 cards in hand from that they drew that turn. They will attack first before playing their cards. In that sense, you'll most likely be able to get a card out of their hand unless they're able to get to use them right away during combat. So I think this card is going to have some uses. I'm not quite sure about if Ice has a lot of room to play with in terms of what this card does. I think it's good, but we'll see if they're able to fit it in. And in Sealed, yes, please, in Sealed, please use this card. It is very good. Okay. Next up, Borgen. Borgen is 1-drop 3k, Final Fantasy 2, so that's good for Leon if he's betrayed you yet again. When Borgen is put up from the field to the break zone, your opponent discard 1 card from his or her hand. So that's another one of those cheap forwards that discard cards from your opponent's hand, such as Argeth or Thaumaturge. And Borgen, though, can come in cheaper if you have a backup to play with it. I don't really love this card, I'll say, because when it is better... Hold on, let's see. Put the field to the break zone. So, yeah, I don't love it because it's not... okay, I take back what I said about Thaumaturge and Argeth, because Borgen actually needs to break to get the effect. And so that means you want to play it out... maybe clear the way for him to be able to deal damage to your opponent sometimes, and sometimes when you're behind, force a discard out of your opponent's hand. I don't love that card, but if you prove me wrong, then more power to you. Next up, we've got, ta-da, more mono art. Look at that. I think it's a cat. That's with Laguna, so that's pretty awesome. Job President, yeah, I think that's awesome. Final Fantasy 8, that's great. So when Laguna enters the field, you may search for 1 card named Squall, add it to your hand. So in Constructed, there's definitely many different versions of Squall. Currently the most popular one would be the 4 CP one. The 3 CP Legendary from Opus 1 was pretty good at the time. The 5 CP has never been used, or I've never seen it used personally. And now there's a 2 CP version. If you want me to pull it up again, let me see what I can do. All right. This is the 2 CP version of Squall. So in Constructed, I think that's okay. That's not great. In Sealed, it's kind of hard because if you're not able to force enough discard out of your opponent's hand, then Squall's not going to be that effective. So I'm going to hold back on what I think about this card for now until somebody kind of shows me how it's done correctly. Okay? Oh, all right. I'll keep this card upside down for the next reveal, which I actually don't have a copy of. So next one would be Rinoa, which is also a mono art. Quite beautiful. So 4 CP, 7k, so that's a bit on the curve. Forward, when Rinoa enters the field, choose 1 forward other than Rinoa you control, remove it from the game, then play the remove forward onto the field dull. Okay, so I think what's going to be good about it is being able to get enter the field abilities to trigger once again. So we're talking about like Genesis, Lock, things like that. That's going to be great. So if you're playing very aggressively and you're able to do that, I think this card is an additional way to kind of get a semi-devout-like effect for fours that you already have on the field. So the best way to probably use it would be to attack first, get the damage through, and then play Rinoa to get the effect back, and because it comes into play dull. So you don't want to do it in your main phase if you want to attack with your forward, because not only would it be dull, but also it would have it wouldn't be able to attack until the next turn. So you want to attack first and then do it, or use an ability first, like if he has a dull ability, and then be able to replay it and dull it. So that could work out for you. Okay, and looks like last but not least for ice, we have Lock. So unfortunately for Lock, the card is named Lock. So the Opus 4 Lock is very popular, so this one might not see much play. But if you want to go with a different route, being a 4-drop 7k is a bit undercurved, but it's technically a 2-drop 7k, since if you build your deck around having a lot of Final Fantasy 6 characters, you will be able to most likely trigger off the effect and get another card in hand. So that's pretty good. In terms of sealed, if it's going to be hard for you to get enough copies to get it to the ability to go off, and then you'll be stuck with a 4-drop 7k, which is not the worst, but it's a bit undercurved. So I wouldn't prioritize building your deck around it if it was sealed. But if you're somehow lucky enough to get a lot of Final Fantasy 6 characters, go ahead. So thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down below. And thanks again to MatchTechGames.com, our sponsor. If you want to go ahead and check out their trade-in system, where you could trade in cards from all the other opuses to turn into Opus 6 boxes for the release next week, go ahead and do so. I mean, I know a couple of people have already done so, and I know that I've made use of that offer as well, being able to turn some of my spare cards that I've won over many tournaments into the brand new cards that I want to take a look at, I want to crack open, and I want to get. It's pretty amazing. I like this set. You're going to need to practice with brand new boosters to be able to qualify at Gen Con with sealed. Otherwise, you're really going to try to luck out, and you won't have many chances since we're going to go through Swiss. Then after that, it's going to be Top Cut. So I would definitely buy a bunch of packs and practice, and hopefully build out your collection that way. And a good way to do that would be to trade in some cards and buy boxes. So thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Lauren from the Break Zone, and I will see you next time.